Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Nuasan webinar this evening. We're going to give you a few minutes to get yourselves settled in and online before we get started. We do have lots of people registered to be online with us tonight. So while we wait for everyone to come on, as we've just posted in the chat box, do let us know where you are tuning in from. I'm in Galway. I think John is in Cork.
Cork.
Yeah, Linda's in Galway as well from Nuasan. So please don't be shy. Tell us where you are tuning in from. My name is Joanne Murphy, and I'm delighted to host this second webinar in the Nuasan Webinar Series. If you missed the last one, you can head over to Nuasan's YouTube channel and watch back a very insightful and informative chat with Dr. Niamh Flynn, where we discussed all aspects of sports psychology and hypnotherapy. This evening, we are delighted to welcome physiotherapist John Phelan from Life Fit Physio and Bike Fit Physio, busy man in County Cork. He is a regular around the triathlon, cycling and adventure race scene and circles. I have had a quick peek at his presentation and can't wait to hear his tips for improving comfort, recovery and performance on the bike. So this webinar is suitable for cyclists of all abilities, and John would love to answer any questions that you may have. So please do make sure to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask questions, and at the very end we'll go through as many of those as we can. Now, everyone who does send in a question will be entered into a draw to win one of Nuasan's new fancy massage guns. They are awesome, and a tube of their magic CBD muscle gel, which is my favorite product in the Nuasan product line. So make sure to send in a few questions, and of course you also receive 10% off products just for joining us tonight on the webinar. And just so you're aware, we will be recording tonight's session. It will be available on Nuasan's YouTube channel after the event. So before we hand over to John, let's just see, we have quite a few people in the room with us this evening. I'd like to know, what kind of a cyclist are you? So answer our poll. Do you cycle for fun? Do you cycle competitively? Do you cycle to work? Or maybe you're not a cyclist at all. So pop in your answer there. We'll give you a couple of seconds to get those answers in, and then we will get Linda to share the results.
You'd hope fun would be 100%, no? You'd hope so.
Yeah, you'd hope everyone would have fun. So hello to Andy Pratt in Tullamore and Alan Walker in Derry. Lovely to have you joining us from around the country. Don't forget, you can post in the chat or the Q&A where you are tuning in from. Linda, can you show us the poll results?
Yeah, so I just end it here now and should be sharing it there now. Can you see it?
I can indeed. Cycle for fun. Good answer, everybody. Cycle competitively, 36%. Great. There's lots of races happening around the country this year and indeed abroad. Cycle to work. Interesting. No commuter cyclists, and 7%. So 2 people that are on with this are not cyclists. So what I'd love to know from a personal perspective really is, are you a triathlete? Are you a cyclist, pure and utter cyclist? Are you an adventure racer? If you take part in cycling as your hobby, do you do gravel, MTB? Are you one of the racers that will be taking on the likes of the Ross Mayo or maybe Ross Talchin later on in the year? Do let us know in the chat function what sort of a cyclist you are. And for those of you who are not cyclists yet, we hope tonight's webinar will inspire you to purchase a bike and become a cyclist. So that's enough from me for the moment. I'm going to hand you over to John now to get the session underway, but please don't be shy. Use the chat function to have a chat with us, and also the Q&A function throughout the session. We should be back to you with some questions and answers in about 30 minutes or so. Now over to you, John.
Cheers. So yeah, I'll just pull up my slide. 1 second now. Thank you for having me at the Nuasan community. It's a pleasure to present, and it was a sort of a star alignment time when myself and Linda met outside the electric charging point in Killarney. We both have electric cars, and I was asked to talk, so here we are. And I'll just get straight into it, because I gotta do like a talk here covering these 3 big topics in 30 minutes. So, you know, I want to just enough of the jabber and get going. So I'd like to start with the lay of the land. Whoops, my bad. In here, okay. So you know, I want to keep it like a little informal is always nice. I find the chat is a nice approach. And then when it comes to question time, there's nothing too small or silly. Just throw them out there, and you get into a competition for a prize. So it's a win-win. We're going to talk about the three main topics here, from myself, a physio, to you, a cyclist. We're going to cover performance, comfort, and recovery. And what you'll find is that there's a sort of a synchronicity between them all. Well, definitely between performance and comfort that we will get to. My background first. So like I studied nutritional science in UCC a long time ago, and then figured I needed to kind of add to that. So I got into gym instruction, and then from there into physiotherapy. I'm a bike fitter now, but like I don't want to be pigeonholed as a bike fitter. So that's why I'm pushing this Life Fit Physio and Bike Fit Physio kind of brand at the moment. I got really into bike fitting just before finishing my time in Edinburgh, and I came home and started up the business. But I also got into kind of testing clients as well through a metabolic testing kit called Pinoy, and that then led me into getting interested in exercise physiology. So I was lucky to get some nice training with the head physiologist under that company, and I've then used that as a testing facility in the clinic, but also to now offer a coaching service where I can test the clients, cover their physio needs, nutritional needs, and bike fit needs. And so yeah, it's coming together nicely. Pain science is one of my passions as a physio. It's a fascinating area. It's one that I would actually love to present if Nuasan wanted that in the future. I would happily give a talk on that. I think it's incredibly interesting and something that a lot of people would get a lot from. It's something I won't go into now, but it's really how pain can, the brain can become good at making pain if we have pain for longer than 3 months. So it becomes more of a psychosocial side. So it's very interesting. I'm a parent to two small girls, and I like to keep it playful. This is me there. If you remember the Beast from the East, I put it up because I thought we were going to get snow tonight or tomorrow or someday this week, but that was 5 years ago, and that was having a bit of crack. My youngest sister, always says you have to have the crack, so we keep it that way. A big bike nut. We've got a cargo bike to put the girls in. It's an old classic Dutch model. We have mountain bikes. I'm big into cyclocross at the moment, so that meant I had to get more bikes. But you know, I sold a few as well, so I'm not a hoarder. Trail running, I'm getting myself ready for the Kerryway Ultra Light, so the 56k, not the 200. So that's why I'm going to do the long event this weekend in Kenmare to prep for that. I like balancing babies, not my own, but I mean like land on a surfboard, on a ski or a snowboard. That's my thing. And then breath and Buddhism. We won't go into religion, but the breath will come into today's chat because it's actually a really important part of recovery. So let's get stuck in. I'm starting with performance, right? So you can see here the big orange sticker says performance. And I thought, I could go into aerodynamics. I could talk about power to weight ratio. I could talk about how to get the bike as quickly as you can down a hill, taking on corners. But you know what? I thought this would be the better one to look at. It's the pedal technique and the pedal stroke, okay? Because we all learned to cycle a bike at a young age, and we probably just, pedal this, like, what would you say? Like, just pedal the bike, just move your legs. And yes, that's true, and it's a very efficient. It's the most efficient mode of transport, but we can make it even more efficient by pedaling correctly. So the first thing I would say is, like, be aware that there is actually a proper way to pedal the bike. So that's what I'm saying here right now. The second thing is, like, you could know how to pedal correctly, but if your bike's set up inaccurately, so say the seat is too high, you're not going to be able to pedal smoothly. You're going to be reaching, and also if the seat was too far forward, you will also be almost too close to the middle of the bike, and you'll be hard to pedal over the top of the pedal stroke, which will make sense in a second. So we need a fitted bike. The cleats on the shoes, they're going to influence your pedal stroke, so they need to be in the correct position. And then the shoes themselves, so like if your feet are floating around inside in the shoe and it's not giving you a lovely, it's not hugging your foot from the top, and your foot is like free to move inside the shoe, you're not really going to have a smooth pedal stroke because of that. I put in conditioned lower limb muscles, because like cycling is, we get fatigue in our muscles, especially the gastroc and the soleus muscle, which is behind the calf muscle. So the gastroc is the calf muscle, and the soleus sits in behind it, and that muscle has to do a lot of work when we're cycling, and it's prone to fatigue. So if that gets tired, the pedal stroke quality will drop off. And then just practice it. Especially what I'm going to talk about now, this has to take 6 or 8 months of bedding in, of doing single leg drills, of really focusing. It's hard to do that if you're out on the bike with your friends, or you're out with your club and you get into chats. It's hard to really focus on the pedal stroke, so you do need time on your own on the turbo trainer to practice this. So here's a slide I've taken from a partner I partner up with called Gebiemized. So they're a German offshoot from a university, professional bike fit kind of a small company, and they are the developers of pressure mapping technology. So I use foot pressure mapping and saddle pressure mapping at the studio, and this slide here basically looks at what the foot pressure mapping can detect. Okay, so on the left we can see a force over time plot. So we see this red line going up and up and up and up, and it hits the peak there where the red box is showing it, and that's the kind of 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock on the pedal stroke. So if you just take your eyes over to the pedal stroke, you can see that red box is here around about that 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock area. So that's your peak force. So that's where the highest force you can apply on the pedal stroke happens. And then if you follow this red line, which could be say for the right foot, it will bring you down, and it gets to the green box, which is at the very back of the pedal stroke. So we wouldn't want any force going into the pedal at this point, because it's counterproductive. You don't want to be applying force to the back of the pedal stroke. So that's why the force line is dropping off. Okay, and then we simply go back up again. If you follow that red line, you're now going up towards 12 o'clock, and then across, and then it'll peak then at 3 o'clock. So I'm talking about this just to kind of raise your awareness of the actual pedal stroke, and we break it down into quadrants. So we would have quadrant 1 would be maybe 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock. Yeah, so you can see that now. You can all kind of look at that foot chart I'm looking at, and we can visualize quadrant 1. Quadrant 2, like 2 o'clock down to 4 o'clock, 3, 4 to 7, and then 7 to 10 up at the back for quadrant 4. So what I wanted to get across here is how should we pedal our bike, and I wanted to simplify it and say we should really push down and away from us. Okay, rather than just pushing down. So a lot of like maybe people who have maybe new to the sport, or they have just developed a habit, they might just be pushing down on the pedals. So when they get to 3 o'clock, they're just pushing down, and that's their main force. Okay, but really we should be at 11 a.m. where my mouse here, if you can see it at this foot, we should be initiating our pedal stroke and driving the foot down and away from us towards 4 p.m. That might sound silly, because at the end of the day it's a circle and you're trying to push diagonally away from you, but it's effective, and you're basically using that top quadrant 1 of the pedal stroke. You're trying to utilize that area, because that's called the dead space. A lot of amateurs won't use it, so we're trying to use that and get more out of every pedal stroke. What's really interesting as well about this technology is that it'll pick up if someone is got a poor coordination, or maybe they're reaching. So see the blue line here, so that could be the other foot, and when it comes down, as it passes the 3 o'clock, it's coming down. We can see a hiccup happen in the force graph here, and that's basically at 6 o'clock. So they need to push extra force to get around the bottom of the pedal stroke. So that's an indication that it's lacking smoothness. Maybe there's a bike fit issue, there could be a leg length issue, it could be a number of things. So I've also said, leave it alone at 6 o'clock, yeah? A lot of people will tell you, oh, like drag, what is it? Wipe the SH1T off your shoe at the bottom of the pedal stroke, you know, kind of scoop it underneath the pedal stroke. But actually, that's just not worth doing, because if we're pulling under with our left foot and then we're driving over with our right foot at the same time, we're causing a sort of a twisting of the pelvis, which you'll see later is not something advisable to happen at the saddle. Then we'd suggest that you offload the pedal or de-weigh your foot when it gets to the back of the pedal stroke. There's a reason for that, a neurological reason that I'm going to get to a little bit later in the talk. But it's basically saying, yeah, no pushing of the pedal when it's back at 9 o'clock in the pedal stroke. So to keep it playful, what time is it, Mr. Wolf? Well, push down and away towards 4 o'clock, and once you hit 11 a.m. So it might sound crazy, but I hope that now makes a bit of sense. Practice. So to come out of performance, like that's all I wanted to say in performance. But you'll find that when I move into comfort, there's going to be a lot of like similarities. Like if you can improve comfort, you will improve performance, and you'll see now why. Okay. So with comfort, I've pulled up stability. Okay, so stability on the saddle. And of course, we're going to have to talk about saddles because they're the biggest bone of contention to someone being comfortable on the bike. So what if I want to just say as a physiotherapist, because that's where I'm trying to come from this talk, is that a physiotherapist will look at stability, and their definition is an inability to control movement. Okay, but if a member of the public sees stability or instability, they can start to think like something's about to fall off, like it's a bad thing, instability. Okay, but it's not. It's just maybe not controlling movement as well as you should be. So what is stability? Well, how do we measure it? We're going to look at saddle pressure mapping. Okay, because you could look at it with your naked eye. So imagine this young guy in front of us, he's pedaling his bike. I could stand behind him, I could look at his pelvis and maybe see that there's a bit of movement happening there. But that's hard to trust your own, as amazing as the eye and the frames per second it has, it still can lead us astray. So we use saddle pressure mapping to determine how much the pelvis moves. Okay. Before I go in there, I just want to give you a little background on bike fit, because maybe some of you will be interested in this. But like, look, this guy, he was pre-screened before he was on the bike, and he came in with low back ache. I think there was a bit of shoulder discomfort, and he also had sort of numbness going down his leg into his foot. Okay, so when we measured him, his hamstrings were they were not flexible. He struggled to get a nice straight leg raise, which is a big indicator to how high you should put someone's saddle. So this gentleman should not have been up as high as he was. So if we look on the left there, we can see 144 degrees at his knee angle, and the science papers are showing a recommended range of 138 to 148. So he's kind of up at the higher end. And if you look at his ankle, he's also reaching here because his heel is actually a little high here. So all the signs of reaching, stressing out the nerve, causing numbness down his leg. And then you don't need to be a bike fitter to see that his back is maybe a wee bit under pressure there, especially when he doesn't flex through his lower back very well, you know. So if someone had very good flexibility, then that could be absolutely fine. But for this kid, he didn't have good flexibility. You know, he couldn't touch his toes. So he had the bike in a very aggressive position. So you can see we dropped the seat, we brought it a little bit forward, and we lifted up the handlebars. Okay, so we've improved those numbers. Now, if I forward into this slide, it tells us how the pressure mapping works. So on the left was his initial reading. So we see lots of a black line here. This is the tracing of where the center of his pressure of his pelvis on the seat, the center of that pressure moved a lot. It went up, it went down. Yeah, it actually moved 60 millimeters laterally and 48 millimeters longitudinally, right? So that's quite a lot. And that can give rise to discomfort. It can give rise to backache. You know, lots of movement of the pelvis can irritate the spine. Just on an offshoot, just, you know, for those of you who may have low back pain, it's very common in cycling. If you're getting low back ache, maybe about 60 or 90 minutes into your cycle, the likelihood is that it's because your back is maybe a bit too flexed, kind of like this gentleman here, too bent for its capability, you know. That would be how that back pain presents. If you're getting back pain that comes on after your cycle, is, you know, you get off your bike, you go back home, and then you get a bit sore and stiff, that can be because of just instability on the seat, too much movement of your pelvis, maybe irritating the joints of your spine, and that can get sore after your bike. Okay, so this guy's moving too much, and you can see with the changes we made, we were able to really condense down his movements. We halved his longitudinal movements, and we halved his lateral movement there, C27, and was 60. So you can get very precise here, and these are the German GBMized company have made case studies and research on what we should be trying to get, which is about 25 mil. We also want to try and hit maybe a 40-60 ratio up the front of the saddle to the back of the saddle, which is what we managed to do here. Okay, so without getting too techie, I'll just show you a quick slide on how it works. My daughter screams during this video, so just don't be afraid or alerted about that. But the red dot, that's what you're seeing, that red dot, you saw it moving around, and that's how the technology basically operates. Okay, it's force detection, picks up force, and then we can divide that by area to get pressure. So the next slide I have is a lady from my own club, actually, Dungarvan. I may be living in Cork, but I'm from Waterford and I'm from Dungarvan. And I went back to Dungarvan to give a group bike fitting session before COVID. And this lady is a triathlete, and she wanted to set up her road bike into a bit more of a triathlon bike. So she had her TT bars in place, but what she was uncomfortable, right? She was getting saddle sores, saddle issues, just needed a bike fit. So we can see here on the left, she's on a road saddle. So she's basically on the saddle that came with this road bike, and you can see what's happening. Her pelvis is having to kind of roll back to get into the back of the seat so that she can be some way comfortable. She can get her sit bones onto the back of the seat, and that's then causing her lower back to kind of flex and her pelvis to roll backwards. So, which is actually then, if you follow up the line here, it means that she can't really get her shoulder, you know, up over her elbow, and her elbow is a little bit back from her TT bar. So everything is kind of pulled back. When we know with a TT bike, you want to get the rider forward, you know, the seat should go forward and get a lot of weight down through the elbows. Okay, so what we did, we helped her performance and comfort here in a oneer. We basically took that saddle off the bike, and we put I stocked the GBMized saddle range because they had the pressure mapping technology. They knew how to do a proper range of saddles. So they have a TT saddle called the Stride, and we popped that on there, and it meant that this lady could roll her pelvis forward. You can see, if some of you might have to I have to pull my face here down to the corner, but you can see the arrow is rolling forward. She was able to roll the pelvis forward and be comfortable. That's the main thing. The other thing here is that the hip angle, that's just another bike fit angle we look at in TT bikes. We try to keep this angle open, okay? If it closes down like we see on the left, it means that she's going to struggle to push power across the top of the pedal stroke, okay? Whereas if we can open it like we did on the right, that's a plus. And this is why crank length, see this crank is the thing that attaches the pedal to the bike. On all new TT bikes, you'll see the crank length is going to be shorter, like 165s, and that's because the rider can still get in a low aerodynamic position, but the foot won't be as high up and the knee won't be as high up because the crank will be shorter. So their hip angle will stay as high and open as it can do. Okay. That's a whole area called the power aero trade-off, and I'm not going to go into that right now, but that's what that is. So this is the saddle mapping for this lady. On the left, we can see she's trying to get stable on that road saddle. She's the color you're seeing is the pressure she's putting on the seat, and it's back from the nose, because this is the nose of the seat, this black outline. So she's way back in the seat trying to get comfortable. And when the red line is at this angle, it means she's not able to stabilize her pelvis. Here, amazing, like very stable, very happy. And we also heard feedback that she was much happier on the bike, could hold her position. So saddles, look, I mean, I've got 4 types of saddles here. We've got the V-shaped road saddle, short nose, cutaway. We have a T-shape, very easy to see that, long nose with a space at the back. Then we have the old 2-prong TT saddle, ISM, and then we have the GBMI Stride, which has a bridge and a bit of it's not as wide as the ISM. So the negative side of the ISM is it's a bit wide, and it can force the rider onto the nose, where they can become a bit uncomfortable and shuffle around, whereas the Stride will allow them back further into the seat. It's a very popular saddle actually in the internet or Ironman pro circuit. It's really getting some good feedback on that. So I just gave you a little insight into the 4 saddles. And now if we look at, we'll come back to the saddle, but I want you to get this slide, understand it, that if simplistically, low backache can come from being too far in one direction. So having the pelvis rotating back the way with the red arrow there, and maybe having the spine a bit too flexed, you know, too rounded, banana back type thing. And then the opposite direction, if you're rolling your pelvis a bit too far forward, if you're on a road saddle that's not catering for that, you can then end up with some saddle discomfort, perineal pressure, numbness, genital numbness. So that's just a simple slide, and we want to try and get that balance right. This is a T-shaped saddle. A lot of you will have this on your bike. Absolutely, you'll see a lot of this in the pro circuit as well. It does require though that you have your sit bones sitting at the back here, and that you don't roll your pelvis too far forward. Otherwise, you'll end up in the middle of the seat, and the seat's not wide enough to support your pelvis. Okay, so I mentioned that because there's 2 different types of sitting. You really get 2 types of loading on a seat. Okay, you'll have one type of rider who will sit predominantly onto their sit bones. They will be towards the back of the seat. You see it here on the left. You know, there's not much pressure going on up in the nose of the seat, and their center of pressure, that squiggly black line I was telling you about, that's nicely tucked to the back of the seat. So they're sitting at the back. They have no business rolling into the middle of a T-shaped seat, because there's no space there to support them. So that's why they have to sit at the back of a T-shaped saddle. Now, if you put a person who likes to sit on their sit bones, and you put them on a V-shaped saddle, a kind of a wider wing saddle like I showed you on the slide there, there's a chance that they could have some friction on the inside of their thigh, because they're going to want to sit at the back, and then their thigh will get quite close to the wings. Okay, and that may cause irritation, which could then mean like, yeah, it's not the ideal saddle for them. They should go on to a T-shaped saddle, where the wings are not wide and they can get some nice leg clearance. Equally here, if you have someone who likes to roll their pelvis a little bit more forward, they should really be, they'll be so much happier on a V-shaped saddle, where there's space in the middle, where their pelvis can be supported, like here on the right here. So their center of pressure will typically be up in the middle of the seat, and you'll see that pressure distribution, kind of the pubic rami bones along the side here. You won't see that typical sit bone back at the back there, you know, with this type of rider. So this is where you might give this rider a cutout, a V-shaped saddle with a cutout, because the cutout will actually help with pressure relief more than a channel would. So like, you know, a little indentation in the seat. But you know, if someone's getting genital numbness, we would recommend that they use a cutout. If someone's not getting genital numbness, then they can use a V-shaped saddle with a channel instead. The cutout basically helps avoid what you call like a blocking of blood flow. So if you get a blood flow blockage because of the pressure, you can actually get, that can happen very quickly, and numbness can happen, most likely will. So I have up here on the right that if you are on a T-shaped saddle, okay, you should have good flexibility. You know, you should be able to touch your toes, get into this sort of position like this gentleman here on the picture, good flexibility through the pelvis, good flexibility through the hamstrings, because you need to be able to sit at the back of the seat and stay back there. And if you don't have good flexibility, the likelihood is that you'll slide into the middle of the seat, and that could there be your reason for saddle sores. Okay, so it's complicated, but I hope I'm getting the point across that a T-shaped saddle, you should have good flexibility. The main load is on the sit bones, and you have nice leg clearance there. And then a V-shaped saddle, you're sitting mostly in the middle. Maybe your spine is a bit more flat. You know, your pelvis is slightly rolled forward, and you have you might not have the best flexibility. Or sorry, you could have brilliant flexibility but still want to sit on a V-shaped saddle in that way. And that's why it's not just black or white. So coming away from saddles, I want to look at the shoe, okay, because it's an area of interest of mine at the moment. I have a mentor in the UK who I'm learning from all the time, and we're doing a project on the comfort of bike shoes. So look, here's one. If you're not comfortable in your shoe, take the insole out of your shoe, put it on the floor, and put your foot on the insole. And if your foot is sort of splaying out width of the insole, like maybe a centimeter on each side, as in your foot's too wide for the insole, then there's a good chance. I mean, your foot is definitely too wide for your shoe. So, and if you're getting numbness, hot foot, that's the most likely reason, is that you need a wider shoe, and they do exist, and it's something I have added to my service. You could also look at the wear markings on the insole that you've been cycling in that shoe for a while. And if there's a lot of pressure on the outside of that insole, that's not good. We want more wear happening on the inside of the shoe towards the base of your first metatarsal, the big toe. Fill your boots. So I've just said there, like, you'll have some people will have a very they will need to like tighten their shoes so much. I had one guy in before, A2 racer, like, he really needed to wind up the crank of his shoe in order to fasten it down. So he had a low volume foot. So he had a low arch, and he needs to be in a shoe that's suitable for a low volume foot, so that he doesn't have to like compress it down as much. So that was something we could help him out. And equally, you could have someone with a high volume foot, high arch. If you measure the distance from the floor up to the top of their foot, it's quite high. They need to be in a shoe that's going to be able to cater for that high volume, so that they don't get like sore across the top of the foot. So there's quite a lot to it. And then if we bring in footbeds, it's interesting. It's not actually, I'll talk about it, but not for long. But it's basically the neurological side of bike fitting is coming out now. There's good papers behind it. It's not to try to, stabilize the foot and stop it from, structurally, help it structurally. It's actually about neurologically, right? So if we put a proper footbed, not the one that you'll find in the bike shoes, they're not good. They're flat. They're not doing what we want to happen here. If you put a proper footbed in, and you're getting you basically want to get contact under the arch of your foot, and continuous contact right down to the base of your first metatarsal. Okay, so right down to where the knuckle of your big toe, the first knuckle. So you want good contact along there. The reason is because you've all these receptors in your foot, and what we're trying to do is make cycling similar to walking and running, because the brain knows how to walk and run. It's so familiar with it. It's getting all that feedback from the feet. Whereas when we're in a cycling shoe, it's an alien sport. We're not really getting the same amount of feedback up to the brain. But we can improve feedback to the brain by, getting good contact under the foot, touching of the receptors, feeding back to the central nervous system. And the other area, which I said I'd mention at the start of the talk, is actually quite interesting. It's the windlass mechanism. So you can see here this diagram. When the big toe lifts up, we get a tensioning of the plantar fascia. People have had plantar fascia pain. I imagine it's quite common. It's that structure there getting overloaded, right? But how it works is like if I lift the big toe up, then the plantar fascia tightens. So when you run, you get a natural tightening as the foot, as the heel leaves the ground. The plantar fascia tightens, and then it relaxes as we land the foot back down again. So the brain gets used to this on-off tightening, relaxing of the plantar fascia. If you have a proper footbed under the arch, nicely matching the person's foot arch height, then when they push at 3 o'clock, they will push down, and the arch will push into their plantar fascia and create a little tensioning there, you see? So you're getting a replication almost of running, and that there, the brain just picks that up. It can sense that on off again, and we're just trying to allow the central nervous system to do its job. And what the papers are finding is that if we do this, you can get better knee alignment, better pelvic alignment, connectedness with the bike, and comfort all improving. Okay, so I do tell everyone that comes through my doors about this, and then they can decide if they wish to try them or leave them behind. Okay. Comfort. So that's why that's in comfort, but also performance, as I mentioned. So moving on to recovery, the third part. As a physio, I couldn't look past the importance of strength training. Okay, like the papers are very, very clear that we can improve our performance again, okay, through strength training. Your power output will increase, your performance on the bike, but recovery also, because if you have better muscle conditioning, then after a hard cycle, you won't be as fatigued and as sort of requiring a lot, lots of recovery, like the person who's not strong. So the person who doesn't do strength and conditioning will be a little bit more they'll need a bit more recovery after a hard session. Yeah, so it's that way. You're just trying to get your body more robust and able for your sport. So I won't go through them. I did have videos up, but it just took too long. So look, the step up, everyone knows a step up, but try and make it more cycling specific by leaning a bit more like into a bike position, and maybe try doing a step up with just the ball of your foot on the bench rather than the entire foot. So you're trying to mock up the cycling situation there. Bent knee heel raise, so important to get the soleus muscle up to scratch. Lots of repetitions, 25 reps, 3 sets, plus some weight. Get that muscle able to be fatigue resistant. Bulgarian split squats, great for someone who's sitting a lot and just cycling and sitting. They're getting to open the hip up and get it into extension there with that exercise while strengthening the other leg. And I mentioned about the guy with the shorter hamstrings. See if you can lengthen your hamstrings in any way possible. Downward dog, single leg RDL, because if you can get your hamstrings to just lengthen a little bit more, then your bike fit changes and your seat height goes up. Okay. Recovery. So as I said in the start of the talk, I'm very much into exercise physiology, and as physios, we are also interested in load tolerance, getting the right amount of load so that you don't get overload injuries. Okay, so it's like that with recovery. You want to put your body in the best position to recover. So the 80-20 principle is actually getting a lot of scientific solid grounding at the moment. You've got the coach for Pogacar. He's a big advocate of it. Got an Italian guy over in Colorado. Another guy called Steven Siegler, I think it is. He's promoting it. So like they've got good papers. And what it is like 80% of your training should really be down in that low zone, low to moderate zone of zone 2, basically. Zone 2. The mistake you make is like zone 2 should not be a very easy spin. It should be able to have a conversation, but not a very easy conversation. It's just a little bit challenging to have a conversation. That's where you want to be, and that's where a lot of benefits happen. They're fine. This is why the government have got behind this, and they're promoting 150 minutes of zone 2 work per week, not for performance, which it absolutely does. It's just for general health. So we're getting our body better able to metabolize, like, better metabolism. We're looking at a better ability to burn fats. We are building capillaries, more mitochondria. So it's a very important thing for health. For performance, it also works on building more slow twitch muscle fibers, okay? And it's these slow twitch muscle fibers that will actually use lactate as a fuel source. So we all know that if we work really hard, lactate levels go up and it causes us to slow down. But if we have more slow twitch fibers, we can use the lactate as a fuel source. So your body is able to cope with the higher lactate levels. So this is why zone 2 is absolutely no brainer. And also I put in 1, maybe 2 hard interval sessions a week. Like if you're doing more than that, it's just such a hard task for your body to recover from that. Yeah. Whereas if you're sticking with the 80-20 principle, maybe doing 1 or 2 hard sessions a week, you're going to recover. And that's the name of the game, sleep, obviously, on top of that. It's one of the most important ones, but I won't go into it right now. I'm just sticking to this sort of science-based training. Know your zones, because you might think you're in zone 2. Like I said, it's hard to call it. It's conversational, but not very, very easy conversation. If you do happen to know your zones, then at least you're taking that guesswork out of it. You get metabolic tested. That's the service I was talking about at the start at the studio. But you could also do some home tests, and at least get a ballpark area of where your zones are. Then I have breath work. Okay, so like, again, another area that's just coming. It's just everywhere at the moment, and there's basically, we can control our nervous system with our breath, and whereas before we didn't think we could, but it's now shown that we can really help bring on so we have the sympathetic system and then the parasympathetic nervous system. And if the parasympathetic nervous system is the rest and digest, and it's where recovery is happening better, okay, it's more effective. So if we're all going around stressed at work and maybe pushing our bodies under too much stress with exercise, you won't have as much parasympathetic nervous system in charge, and it's more difficult for you to recover. So how can we influence, how do we get more parasympathetic? Then we work on breath, maybe spending some time doing some slow exhales. Long slow exhales will really switch that on. And I just think that should be part of everyone's their tactics for better recovery, especially if they're going through a hard training patch. We can also then, you've heard of like pushing the boundaries. So putting ourselves into a physical stressful situation, like maybe a cold shower, that then you're challenging your body to try to get the parasympathetic nervous system in charge. So you're trying to exhale slowly in this situation, so that you're trying to recover and adapt to that situation better. So that could happen. You could practice that in the cold shower, and then it can help you in the real life when maybe stress at work and overtraining happens, occasionally. And then lastly, Wim Hof method. It's hard to not look past him either. His breathing techniques are interesting and gaining more popularity and research behind them, whereby his 3 cycles of deep inhalations and quick exhalations has been shown to improve our immune system. So there's that recovery and immune system are very well linked there. And of course, then we have the product itself, the Nuasan product. I haven't put it in, but I wanted to mention it here because recovery. There's there's papers coming out on the CBD product, the muscle gel, how like it has an anti-inflammatory properties, and this then can help our muscles after activity to try to reduce inflammation and increase recovery. So that we're looking excitedly on the new papers coming out on that. So that brings us almost to the end. A couple of tips. It's actually me just going over the talk quickly. I would say look at cycling, look at how guilty we are for carrying an injury, right? This is taken from a big cycling event in South Africa a number of years ago, where they asked all the participants, are you carrying an injury? And a lot of them, like 25% of the 40 to 50-year-olds, carrying some sort of pain when cycling. And why am I saying this is because cyclists are infamous for just pedaling on through pain. So the most common actually from that study was neck and back and like buttock and perineum area saddle sores. So this is just people are unfortunately saying it's part of cycling, and that is so far from the truth. You can really improve this by, you know, getting on top of it before it becomes persistent. So that's my advice from it as a physio. You know, see someone about it, mention it to your doc. You know, if it's like a saddle issue, mention it to your doctor. Start to get the ball rolling on actually solving it, and then takes it to get on some evidence-based treatment from a physio to help whatever the pain or problem is. And of course, if you are seeing that it's linked to your bike, then yeah, like you can't, a professional bike fit, I think is I'm biased, but I think it's a really, really important place to rule out that as a source or a driver of your symptoms. And then the saddle, again, like if you're getting buttock perineum issues, the saddle needs to be looked at. The saddle could be correct, but it could be in the wrong position, and that will be figured out in a proper bike fit. So I think that's my time up. I didn't time myself, but this is where my last slide. Look, if you want to get in touch with me, I'm trying to push this new landing page because I wanted to have the two websites under one. So lifefit.ie, absolutely no marketing done for that yet, but maybe in a couple of years that would be, you know, you go there and then you can decide, do you want to go to the physio website or the bike fitting one? But either way, I provide, you know, metabolic testing for anyone interested in zoning or VO2 max, or what actually happens when they're exercising. Are they breathing too many times a minute? Are they taking in enough air per breath? It's very interesting stuff. Running analysis is another area I've studied in. Nutritional consultation using the gas analysis to guide it. If you're looking to buy a bike and you don't know what size to get, there's a service there, size before buy. I pay for access to a big database of bikes, and we can get the right size for you. And then shoe fitting, I've mentioned, coaching as well, I didn't put in, but hey, that's where I'll stop, and I'll let Joanne in to save me from my my isolation here.
Thanks, John. We have it was very intriguing and insightful. Lots and lots of questions that I have myself. Never mind the questions that have come in. So we might turn off the screen sharing, and I think Nuasan will be able to do that. Okay, so John, there's just so many questions, but I'm going to come back to just the most recent ones, because Nuasan put up asking if there were any injuries that people may have. You know, when you were talking about the injuries there, someone mentioned neck pain being a problem during cycling, and some other pains. So a couple of people have mentioned they get pain in the front of their knees, they get neck pain. You know, what can they do to, other than use the Nuasan CBD gel to, you know, ease some of the pain? What can people do to alleviate some of the pain? Is it all down to the bike fit? If somebody's bike is too big for them or too small for them, you know, what can people do?
Oh, look, it's hard, like, to, because I can't just say like, because I'd be lying if I said, just get a bike fit, because it could, so it's a neck pain, and maybe a physiotherapy issue. Maybe they're not moving their neck properly. They might be stiff in their mid spine. It's a whole host of things. But say you mentioned, someone said the front of their knee. Don't put up with it. It's a very common injury. I had that slide there, like the knee and the neck are very high, like, you know, 40% of injuries in the bike will be those two. So don't put up with it is the first tip I'd give you. The reason why it may be happening is the seat could be low. If the seat's too low, the knee tends to track poorly, and that can give rise to frontal knee pain. And so if the seat's too far forward, you're you know, this old knee over pedal spindle where they drop that plumb line, that's still one to look at. And if that knee is getting way out in front of your foot, it's going to be, and you combine that with some hills, some high training, it's perfect storm that can happen in that.
Somebody says there that they have pain in the front of their knee and their IT band when they change from their tri shoes to their road bike shoes, the cleats match up as close as can be, and the road shoes are a size bigger. So there's a couple of different elements there to be looked at. But again, that plumb line on the bike might be slightly different. If the bike is a different size, your position on the bike is different, the saddle is different. There's so many different
Unbelievable, yeah, unbelievable. Like the saddle there, like however, that saddle can make you sit so differently on a bike. It influences how you're positioned big time. And like you said, the geometry of the bikes between the TT bike and the road bike, that'll be different. So that'll upset that. You can't just replicate your measurements from one bike to another. People will say that to me. They're like, "Okay," and I say you can try, but I can't stand over it because like the geometry differences, the different saddle. Like if you're dropping a line to see how far that saddle sits behind the middle of the bike, but the other bike could have a saddle that's longer. Yeah, ideally you try to, come in with two bikes, but yeah, if you can try, and then if you could get away with it as well. So it's not like you have to get it right.
So, somebody's mentioning their wrist pain after 40 to 50k, and they've had a bike fit.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe, hopefully, it's not from myself. Maybe there will be some bike fit clients of mine out here, but like, give the bike fitter a chance as well, because it's hard to get it absolutely nailed the first time. So I try to keep in touch with my clients. But yeah, wrist pain, it could be that there's too much weight force going down through the front of their bike, and that can be a weight distribution thing. So they need a bit more on their saddle. Your arms should be light. They should be able to light hands, no white knuckles. So maybe this person has a lot of tension going through their arms. It could be their wrist position on the handlebar could be off.
Yeah. Somebody else asks or says that they asked for 165mm crank on the new road bike purely so that it would match the TT bike because they have a power meter on the crank. Was this a bad idea, awaiting a bike fit in May?
Yeah, no, no, I would say it's not a bad idea. I can see why you've done it, to save you money, so you can just, like, the power meter is the same, maybe the same crank, but the 165 cranks are going to become more and more popular even in road bikes. And if you're what is it? I think they're saying like 73 centimeters. Let me see now. Basically, if you're not the tallest person in the world, if you're kind of like 5 foot kind of less than 5, then the shorter crank will suit you anyway. Okay, now, so maybe that'll help that person's decision. But generally, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that shorter crank. I'd like to add something here, that there's been a guy called Jim Martin in the US who spent 20 years studying this power aero trade-off that I mentioned in my talk, and it was the shorter crank that is the way around that power aero trade-off. And there is no lack of power by using a smaller crank. People think, oh yeah, I should have a longer one to generate more power, but actually there wasn't any. That is not what happens. So that's the answer. He should be absolutely fine with the
questions are coming in thick and fast now. Nobody is being shy at the moment. So somebody says here, I've just started training for an adventure race and don't use cleats. I know this person is also looking to purchase a gravel bike. They use trail runners. Is this a bad idea? And by the way, I have been using the CBD gel for the last few months and it is amazing. So Linda will be smiling there with that piece. So trail runners for an adventure race instead of cleats. What do you think?
Well, I'm guilty of that, so because I use trail runners for adventure racing because it's a much faster transition, and I promote the power grip pedal. So if you are going to stick with trail runner, it's a good pedal. It's got this leather strap, and it can really get your foot quite secure in the pedal while using a trail runner. Okay. So, but for this Saturday, I'm actually going to use bike shoes because I just want to I'm not going to bother pushing myself any. I just want to enjoy myself, so I'm not going to be. So I'm going to have the shoes on the back in some backpack or something.
Somebody else says, I ride a gravel bike. What's the best position for the bike on the trails?
You know what? It's so similar to a road bike. That'd be my question. My answer would be like, if it's set it up just like your road bike, without getting too complicated. If he has a road bike, then try to match him up.
Okay. If someone wants to use their road bike for dual purpose of road cycling and use it for triathlon with clip-on bars, what's the best way to set that up? Is it a movable seat?
This is a brilliant question, and actually this is a blog talk. I have written a blog on this. Sorry, I have already written a blog on this because I just thought, like, I've had too many people coming into me saying, this is my road bike, but I want to set it up as a TT bike because I'm doing, say, the half Ironman, right? So I'll say then to them, you have to decide which is your priority. Do you want to prioritize a road bike, or do you want to prioritize it as a TT bike? Because there's such a different setup. Like, and if they say, oh, look, yeah, I definitely want to commit, I want it to be a TT bike, then we put the TT bars on it and we really bring that saddle forward, and maybe even need to change the saddle, because remember the girl in my presentation, you can't maintain a TT position on a road saddle. Some of them are just not going to work out, so you might have to change the seat, and it's higher, it's forward. So the answer to that question is you have to decide which one you want to. It's hard to get the best of both. Now, if you want it to be more of a road bike and maybe just use the TT bars on occasion, go for it, and put up with a bit of discomfort when you are in the TT position. But you get me, it's hard you can't please both positions.
Okay.
With one bike.
Final question in the chat, and then I'll move across to the Q&A section, is how often should you change your cycling shoes? As in, for how many kilometers should shoes last?
I think they probably mean the cleats. I think so, because the shoe, you'll know if it's completely soft and wrecked, you'll know when it's done. I couldn't tell you how many kilometers, but the cleats, you basically look at the plastic, so the yellow bit will come off first. That's fine. You don't need to change the cleat when the yellow bit or the red bit comes off. It's more the black plastic when that starts to thin out. Yeah, you definitely want to change it before it becomes very thin. It can cause
we got a great answer coming in for that from Peter Matthews, saying depends on how many cafe stops re the cleat wear.
Yeah.
How many times are you walking on those shoes? You mentioned the yellow and the red part on the bottom of the cleats, John, and a lot of people don't know the difference between the two different types. So can you quickly tell us what they are?
Yeah.
Why you would wear one pair versus the other?
Yeah, yellow has the most float. So when you clip in, you can move your heel in and out. When you're in that yellow one, I think it's about 7 or 8 degrees on the Shimano. And then blue is next. I think that's about 3 degrees, and red might be 0 degrees, right? So you cannot move your foot when you're clipped in with the red one. And there's research done on this, and there's really no benefit to trying to get to red. There's no lack of power or efficiency with using yellow. So my advice is, if you're using yellow, stick with it. I would say though, if you're using something like red, don't go immediately to yellow, because then you've introduced movement, and that can upset the hamstrings. I've had a client way back in the past for that. We had to get ready for an Ironman, but we sorted it in the end. But yeah, just gradually.
I have somebody who's answered here, and I won't say his name to embarrass him, but he lives in Dublin. I've my tri shoes since 2014. I think you need to treat yourself there, Loveen, to a new pair of shoes. Okay, so coming back to some of the things that you mentioned in the presentation very quickly, when you mentioned zones, as somebody is asking, I take it you mean HR rather than your power zones, so that your zones that you mentioned in the slide is heart rate rather than power.
Both, because you can have both. You don't need to have both, but I was just generally referring to know your heart rate zones and your power zones if you are monitoring power.
Okay. Somebody else asks, what does a hard interval session look like?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because it should really be zone 4 or 5. Yeah, so we're trying to kind of stay out of zone 3. It's really not going to give us much benefit. So zone 4, you should be up at around 7.5 out of 10 for perceived effort, which is actually a very accurate way of determining how where you should be. So everyone has their own 10 out of 10. So 7.5, and zone 4, you could go at threshold, and you could go like just below threshold, maybe 7 out of 10. So that's called a sweet spot. So there's lots of different terminology. And then the time wise, 6 minutes at threshold is quite a hard session actually. So if you did like 4 or 5 6-minute intervals at threshold, that's tough. So maybe we might want to start off at 3 minutes, and then a zone 5 session would be shorter again, like you're talking VO2 max type session. So maybe 45 seconds to a minute is actually quite tough at a VO2 max effort, and that's like 8.5 out of 10. And we don't do 10 is sprint, and that's separate. That's like kind of like 10 seconds. You don't want to be doing like 10 out of 10 for like 2 minutes, because it just doesn't work. You don't have the energy system for it. So 10 seconds,
okay.
15 seconds,
2 or 3 very quick questions. Somebody is a new grad physio with an interest in working in cycling in the future. Would you recommend doing a bike fit style course to better understand cycling biomechanics and be able to advise better around injuries? It's a very interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, whoever they are, they should get in touch, because we held a physio bike fit course at my studio there in October. The same guy that got me on the right track, Paul Visentini in Melbourne, he came on a tour of Europe, and I kind of lined up with him, and we gave the course. It was a 2-day course. So yeah, like by all means, a physio bike fit course, I'd recommend it. But there are other bike fitting courses out there, and in fact, the International Bike Fitting Institute, IBFI, is now established, and it's to protect the public, because we have to hit levels, so it's all going to be properly ironed out. It's going to be great for the business. So they can just get in touch with IBFI or myself if they want to learn a bit more.
And then somebody's asking here, is it worth doing a metabolic testing and a VO2 max if you're only slightly fit, or would it be of more benefit for fitter people?
Yeah, that's a good question. And actually, I know my answer is no, because you should get it where you're at right now, because that's the best time to know how to train appropriately to get you fitter. It's not for people who are like at a high level of fitness, because like if you get it now, you'll see like, oh, maybe you're you're hyperventilating and you didn't know that, and you're getting that information back, or maybe you just need to know where zone 2 is right now, so you can start training in it immediately, so no, it's
okay.
That's
and then our final question, John, is for you personally. What has been your biggest fitness challenge or learning as you get more into cyclocross?
Oh, cyclocross. Fitness challenge. So it's like, I'm pretty good at starting. Like there's a colleague of mine here on the talk, actually, he actually does bike fitting with me, Dylan. So he'd say that, like, I can go off quick, and I can get away out of the blocks fast, but then my challenge is like, my lap times, they get slower, like, right, like lap 3, lap 4, I'm getting a bit slower, and then I might get last 2 maybe pop up a bit. So the challenge is, how do I keep a nice consistency across those laps? And that comes with training appropriately in that kind of high intensity stuff, but having the zone 2 to back me up. And I know that's where I'm going wrong, because I have like a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, and like I can't get away out for 3 hours or 2 hours. I do like the 1-hour session downstairs when I can be on call if I'm needed. And so I know where it's going wrong, but still enjoy it, like, massively.
Need to chase those elusive negative splits on the laps that we all try to find somewhere, somehow. John, thank you so much. That was super. Thank you to everybody who has joined us tonight. I am conscious that we're slightly gone over the time, but Linda from Nuasan has been sitting there patiently waiting to come in and talk to us. So Linda, the floor is now yours.
Thanks so much, everyone, and thank you, Joanne and John. I've had a great evening so far, and special thanks to Joanne. So if you don't know her, she's actually an international sports announcer and has a very busy schedule ahead for the year. So we're delighted to have her here with us this evening. And I really enjoyed listening to John as well, and clearly so did all of you, judging from the questions that came in. So thank you very much, John. And if anyone is interested in hearing more from John, please do check out his website or his Instagram, which is @BikeFitPhysio, @BikeFitPhysio, sorry. And thanks so much for everyone for joining us. So if you don't know who we are, we're a small company based in Galway. We make natural skin and body care, and our aim is to keep people active and keep people moving. So the topics that we were discussing tonight really is exactly what we're all about. I'm going to be at Quest Kenmare this weekend. So for anyone who's going to be there, please do pop over to say hello to me. I'll be at the registration on the Friday night, and I'll be at the finish line on Saturday. And John is actually going to be there as well, taking part. So please do come over and say hello to us if you see us. And then without further ado, the winner of our prize tonight is Andy Pratt. So congratulations, Andy. If you could send in an email to info@nuasan.com. So just send us in your address and phone number so we can get your prize out to you. The prize is actually one of our new massage guns and our best-selling CBD Magic Muscle Gel. So it's a perfect pair for recovery and soothing aches and pains in muscles and joints. So hope you enjoy that. So thanks again, and I'll pass you back over to Joanne to say goodbye.
Well, I see there that Andy Pratt actually did ask a question to see training tips for the 160k. You don't need to worry about it. Just cycle. Just cycle. Long hours in the saddle.
Best question he ever asked.
Yeah, and make sure that you get a good bike fit and are using the Nuasan recovery products. There'll be no excuses now for not winning the 160k. It's never a race, but it's always a race when it's a sport team. Thank you so much again, everybody, for joining us, and especially to John for the insightful information that he's given us. I've definitely learned loads, and I thought I knew everything, but sure, look at you learn something new every day. Huge thanks as well to Linda and the team behind the scenes as well. Best of luck to everybody who is racing over the next few weeks, and hopefully we'll have another Nuasan webinar in the coming months as well. And don't forget to check out the Nuasan website, www.nuasan.com, and you do get your 10% off as well. So
can I finish with one thing?
Yeah.
Linda, Sinead Cronin in the audience, she came for a bike, but she's wondering if there's a CBD gel for everyone listening tonight.
Not yet, but give her 10% now.
This isn't the Late Late Show, and I'm not Ryan Tuberty. Over and out.
Bye.
Bye.